So, since we're talking Common Core, off we go now to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and with Wyoming Liberty Group is Amy Edmonds, who's been patiently waiting on the phone. And Amy, that is my theory now, officially, as to why we have Common Core. So future generations will never be able to figure out how much debt we've actually put them in. They won't be able to do the math.
It's a great theory, Glenn. I like it.
Great, yeah. I'm going with that one there. By the way, I found out that when you were a little girl in kindergarten, you got your future husband to eat a mud pie, and that's now on your permanent record. So
I did.
Yeah. So I'm kind of, well, my first girlfriend hit me in the head with a lunchbox, and we all saw that where, I ended up becoming a talk show host in Wyoming. So anyway, apparently there's a lot of data mining going on. And is that what you and I were talking about earlier today?
Well, we're talking about the continued concern about data mining, the privacy issues, and security of children's data in the state of Wyoming. And this issue came up again at the recent Joint Education Accountability meeting in Cheyenne in November. So about 2.5 weeks ago, the staff, the legislators met here in Cheyenne to talk about education accountability, and the assessment director for the Wyoming Department of Education came forward to testify. She had numerous things on her agenda, but one of the things that she brought up to the committee, and Glenn, it was very interesting because she actually said at the beginning, I sort of struggled with whether I should brief you all on this, but decided that I had better. And she had brought a member of the Attorney General's office with her, and what she briefed them on was her ongoing negotiations with the ACT. Now, Wyoming administers the ACT test in the 11th grade as its test to comply with the statewide assessment requirements under No Child Left Behind, and also our own requirements, statutory requirements. So in doing that, she has to negotiate a contract with the ACT to deliver that test. And she came to the committee to let them know that she had had some serious issues with that contract over data privacy. That inside the original sort of canned contract that I'm assuming she was presented by the ACT were some real issues over who owned the data, and also the fact that the data was what we call PII, which is personally identifiable information. And she referenced those things and said that she was struggling with that, and actually ended up having to bring in the AG's office to help her. Now, she didn't have a conclusion for the committee because they were still in negotiation, but she felt confident that they were going in a more positive light now that she had brought in the AG. But this just continues to bring up the question of data mining and privacy and who owns this data, who has control of it, where is it going, and how long is it going to be there?
When I look at all the data that they want to collect, I still am struggling with the question of really what good does all of this data do? I don't understand. I look at what they say they want to collect, and a lot of it to me seems to be useless information. Am I wrong about that? I don't understand the purpose of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we would assume that. Of course, there are data metricians and other folks who make a living doing this, and they are obsessed with collecting data and using data. And certainly, we're not saying that the collection of some data is not relevant or important to a certain extent. What we're saying is, you're right. The amount of data that's now being asked for is really just outlandish, and there has to be some real protections for parents and for children over their data, particularly that which is personally identifiable, data that basically clings to you and I and young children for the rest of their life. Where is that data going? Who has ownership over it? And, what happens to it in the future? And this was the question that the director brought up as far as ACT. ACT obviously put into their contract that they were going to be the owners of this. That's troubling, and that should continue to trouble policymakers. It certainly troubles parents.
Well, and I also wonder, okay, I was making fun of, okay, here you are in the sandbox with your future husband back in kindergarten, but really, let's say that back in the kindergarten you had got into a hair-pulling fight with some other girl. Is that something that actually sticks with you all the way into your college years or through the rest of your life? Because I've heard people worried about that much of an extreme. Are we talking about something that extreme?
Well, ultimately, it could be anything. It could be any. I mean, right now, it could be anything the district collects. So, if it was in your child's file, whether it was a notation or just a piece of statistical information, age, sex, anything, ultimately could end up in a file that could ultimately be transmitted to both to the state and then to the federal government. That is the concern, that there is this pipeline of information that there needs to be some serious controls put around it. The other thing we still don't know, Glenn, is in Wyoming we really have no parameters for what happens when there is a data breach. So we've had the data silo essentially that the state of Wyoming currently has, that they've had for many years. We've had plenty of inquiries from researchers and others who have gone in and looked at data. What we don't know, and what no one can tell me or anyone else when asked, we've asked the Department of Education, is, has there been a security breach? Have we lost data? Right. We don't even know that. So, I mean, there's a lot of things here that are not happening that should happen.
Well, and I don't trust anybody, I don't care who they are, when they say that, oh, don't worry, your data is completely safe with us. Once we get it into the system, it's locked down. Some of the most secure servers on the planet have been hacked into. Now, I really doubt, for those people who are tin hatters out there, that anybody is looking for your specific data. Having said that, though, I worry about, let's say, an insurance company that has information about you. Some of that information includes your social security number, financial information, so somebody could hack into it and use it against you. Well, some of that same information, including social security number, is in the data that's supposed to be under lockdown in your school. So I wonder, if I was on the internet and I wanted to dig around some school kids' files to find their social security number so I can get a credit card in their name, I think that could be done these days. That's what I worry about. I know we're going to use computers, but I do worry about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been other instances. I think it was a year and a half or 2 years ago. We had our audit department here at Wyoming does sort of spot audits, and one of the spot audits that they were working on was districts and their login to some of their district servers. And they testified before, I believe it was Joint Appropriations. I attended the meeting and I have my notes somewhere, but they testified and basically said they were concerned because a large number of districts that they audited, they were able to, by pulling up to outside of the district offices, were able to hack into the system because of the way that they keep the server open and the way they do their passwords. Again, right, none of us want to be tin hatters, but what everyone should recognize is if huge companies like Target and even the U.S. military can be hacked into, certainly the Wyoming Department of Education database could be hacked into, and even our local school districts. And this data is important, it is private, and it should not be shared, and there should be protections in place. Meanwhile, we are just, skipping lightly forward with all of these contracts with people like ACT and running down the road toward SBAC, which is the federal consortium. And really it is SBAC that has parents most deeply concerned because of its direct ties to the federal government as sort of creating a silo for information. But there are lots of things that need to be addressed. I know the legislature is very slow at addressing them, but they had better speed it up.
Here's an interesting one for you. I'm not trying to throw you a curveball. It just only struck me when you were talking about all of that. I like to look a lot because, we crossed over $18 trillion in debt, and it really got me that we had the governor just the beginning of this week say he wants to look at Medicaid expansion because of all the money that's supposed to be heading toward Wyoming. The federal government doesn't have this money. But really to track all of this information from the moment a kid enters school, that's going to take a huge bureaucracy. That's going to take a huge system. How much is all of this going to cost, and who's paying for it?
Well, it's going to cost a lot. I mean, there's been some great, I know here at the Liberty Group, sort of that aspect of it, Glenn, Maureen Bader has done a really good job of sort of talking about. It is a huge amount of data, and what she has found, and you should bring her on and talk about this because it's really fascinating, what she has found that actually in countries and places where they've done this, it's actually been, it's unworkable. It's so much information that there's really nothing, it ends up just being too much, and it tips the system over because they're storing information that ultimately a lot of it they just simply can't use.
Yeah.
And so that's an issue, and cost has also been a major issue.
Well, there's the next thing that gets me when you talk about the amount of data that's being, and that's what I was bringing up originally. The first question I asked you was, well, what's the point of all of this? Because I think a lot of the information is just completely useless. Now, I can understand collecting data on me. I am dyslexic, and not much was known about it when I was in school. But to collect information like that and have it follow me as let's say I move to a different school, a different part of the country, that's not a bad idea because that has everything to do with how I need to learn. That information I can understand. But as I try to pour through, I got to tell you, Amy, I get confused trying to understand why they're collecting this information or even what some of this information is.
Yeah, it is confusing. I mean, we don't have hard and fast of exactly every piece. As a matter of fact, the state of Wyoming's in the process because of the work that they're doing on creating this massive database. They're in the process of trying to figure out data dictionaries and different definitions of data and what data do they need to have. I mean, Maureen Bader and myself went over and spoke to the ETS department and just had talks probably 8 or 10 months ago, asking them multiple questions, and they don't even know yet. They're still, quote unquote, developing all of this. So, it is a frightening thing. Parents, I think, are very concerned. It needs to be watched over diligently by citizens, and certainly hard questions need to be asked because as I attend these meetings, Glenn, the one thing that I will say the theme seems to be, and it is frustrating for me because I did serve in the legislature to sit there and not be able to ask all the questions, but what I have noticed is that policymakers don't seem to ask the really relevant questions. There's a lot of silence in this discussion over the ACT negotiation and also the discussion they had at this Joint Education Accountability meeting about the assessment this federal consortium we're involved in. There were not a lot of questions asked. That's concerning. That should be very troubling. We need people who are going to ask. Whether you've made up your mind, if you want to be solidly pro Common Core and you want to be solidly pro SBAC, you should still be asking important questions about implementation. How are you going to do this? What is this going to cost? What does this mean? And that's not happening.
Okay, I'm talking with Amy Edmonds from Wyoming Liberty Group about some Common Core questions dealing with gathering data. So here's what I'm going to hit you with next right after the commercial break. So it gives you a few minutes to think about it. It doesn't sound to me between the legislators and the bureaucracy that's creating all of this that we're supposed to be gathering and storing, it doesn't sound like they know what they're supposed to be gathering and storing and why. And where is that coming from? Hold on, think about that, Amy. We'll come back with it next. I'm on the phone with Amy Edmonds from Wyoming Liberty Group. So the question I left you with is, it sounds to me like between the politicians and the bureaucrats in the state of Wyoming, they really don't even know themselves what information they're supposed to be gathering and why, and what's the purpose of all of this. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I think that there might be a few of them that understand. The state of Wyoming was required us to develop a state longitudinal data system under agreements from some federal monies that we took, education monies. So every state in the union is creating these SLDSs, and I think a lot of legislators don't understand that's where it came from. I think they've been sold on the idea that somehow, like everything else in education, this is magically going to make things better, and collecting data is going to really help, and they're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff, and we're going to magically have kids learning way more. So the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education, is actually funding and mandating these databases, and they want things like, they want these children's academic records, they want health care history, they want disciplinary records, they want family income ranges, they want all kinds of stuff. And so that's why the state of Wyoming is doing it. I'm fairly certain that legislators don't understand everything because, again, Glenn, the state authorized creating this before they decided what it was going to be for. Like, the data dictionary isn't done yet. We don't have all these parameters. All the state has done is funded it.
Okay, because here again, I'm just struggling to understand it at this point. Is there any way to unfund it or get out of it, or what do we want to do here? I mean, maybe just adjust it some? I don't know where to go from here.
No, we need to. I think. I mean, ultimately, the state needs to get out of it.
Yeah.
If we don't understand what it's for, and we don't have clear reasonings for having it, then we should simply get out of it, and we shouldn't even be moving forward with it until we are absolutely certain that we can protect this. Creating these things and going live with them is dangerous territory if we don't know that we can completely and totally protect them. And then again, just creating it because we have to create it doesn't tell us exactly what is it going to be used for and of what, how are we going to get results.
Well, you named a few things in there that really concern me, not just about the kids, but it sounds like they're looking for information on the parents too, if they want to know income levels, things like that. So they're using the kids, it sounds like, to get information on the parents. And I'm not trying to sound tin hatter, I'm really not, but you're going to have to get family-wide information.
Yes, you are. And I think that's what concerns a huge amount of parents. I mean, it's not just, I could go on. There are other things that both the U.S. Department of Education and actually states have had examples of things like fingerprints, retinal, and iris patterns. We had that case in Florida about a year ago where a school district actually took the iris patterns, had someone there, had the little machine, and then when parents found out, they had a huge fit. The superintendent had to come out and say, oh my gosh, we're so sorry, you're right, we didn't ask your permission, parents. We promise. We have burned all of these retinal patterns. They've all been destroyed because we're so sorry. So, it's one thing to say it and people to listen to me thinking, oh, she's a tin hatter. We have examples in the country where it's happened. So, I could go on.
Okay, well, part of, if you want to get into tin hatter for just a moment there, a lot of people will make fun of those preppers who like to live off the grid. It's starting to sound kind of attractive now, isn't it?
Our lives are lived, I think, way too publicly. And the parents in Wyoming that I talk to, I'm old, so I didn't grow up in the Facebook social media age. But parents that are raising young children recognize completely how public their children's lives are becoming in ways that they know are not always positive, and they're concerned over, and they want some measure of control, and what they don't want is to lose control over these things that could matter. I mean, a child that perhaps went through something in their 12, 13 years of age that had to do with depression or suicide should not haunt them the rest of their life when they try to get employment and want to go out and do more. That, I think, is what parents are so profoundly sensitive to, and rightfully so.
Well, there's another part of this. Let the libertarian in me come out for just a moment. If somebody from the government were to walk up to my house and want to know what's in my refrigerator, it's not even their business whether I have a refrigerator or not. If they, when they want to put up one of those smart grid meters, frankly, I just don't want you having the data. I don't think they're doing anything bad with it, but I'd rather that you didn't. Thank you very much. In other words, I'm not trying to be paranoid at all. I'm really not. It's just the answer is none of your business. The problem is we have future generations who are going to be used to the idea that, yes, government's allowed to walk up at any time and stop and ask you anything, and you're supposed to answer. They're supposed to have all that information, what's on your phone, what's on your email, what kind of websites that you surf, and on and on and on the list goes. I think they'll get used to it after a while. I worry about that. I want to see more libertarians out there, jerks like me.
Right. Well, and I want to see more effort into actually educating these children and less into all of this government oversight. I mean, it's just, if we can take this first full circle back to solutions, the solution is to bring it back to the communities and stop all this federal more stuff, and even state stuff. Let's worry about actually educating the children, and the people who are best equipped to do that is the teacher in the classroom and the parent of the child.
All right, Amy. Where do they find you and your work?
Wyoming Liberty Group, wyliberty.org. That's me.
All right. Good to talk to you again.